Several people who were hit by bullets fired by Denver officers in a shooting last month think the department hasn't been truthful. They say the body camera video of the incident in LoDo gives a more complete picture of what really happened. 9 News reporter Kelly Rinke sat down with 3 of those innocent bystanders. Just a warning, some of these images are difficult to look at.
Yikalo, Bailey, and Willis feel lucky to be sitting here today.
When I got shot, it entered the back of my bicep.
I was shot in the back, in my upper back, and it went through and out my upper arm.
I was struck in my foot by a bullet just on the edge of my foot.
They're all recovering from gunshot wounds after 3 Denver police officers fired their guns on a crowded street in LoDo last month.
So it's very frustrating that they just chose to tell a story that was not the full story.
All of them think the department has not been transparent about what happened. Days after the shooting, police shared this still picture and said officers fired at Jordan Waddy after he pointed a gun at them. Body camera video released Tuesday shows the seconds after that image. The victims say it tells a different story than the account originally shared by police.
I see him discard the gun, throw it onto the ground before any, and put his hands up before any shots were fired.
It gives us insight into how they do business. They are protected by their shield, their badge, and whatever information they want to release is under their jurisdiction.
Waddy looks like he's trying to pull something out of his pocket. It happens fast, within a second or two. We can slow it down. Obviously, police can't do that in the moment.
Your instinct should tell you not to fire into a crowd, because that's not a reasonable use of force.
An attorney for the bystanders believes the officers' actions were not justified, but a grand jury will decide if they broke the law.
I see certain triggers, like when I see police cars or a mass crowd, triggers me to kind of relive that moment in my head.
Yikalo, who you just heard from there, recently had surgery to remove the bullet lodged in his bicep and reset the bone in his arm that was shattered. Bailey did not need surgery, but she still has shrapnel lodged in her shoulder, Alex.
Yeah, we've all watched this video now ad nauseum. Regardless of your assessment of it, it's going to be the testimony of these folks that's really going to play a role in the grand jury decision.
Yeah, it's all going to be part of this investigation that is now going to be presented to community members who are a part of this grand jury. And all of these bystanders today told me that they are cautiously optimistic about the outcome.
Oh, we'll certainly see in time. Kelly, thanks for your reporting on this one. Well, Summit County is making changes after a middle school teacher was arrested for sexually assaulting students. Inexplicably, school leaders waited a month before notifying police of allegations the teacher touched several students inappropriately. In a YouTube reel posted today, Superintendent Tony Bird announced an HR audit is requiring reporting training for all staff. Last week, deputies arrested 61-year-old Leonard Grams of suspicion of sexual assault of a child. He's facing 8 felony charges. The district reached out to law enforcement after 7 students came forward with allegations of misconduct. Now, according to an affidavit, it came almost a month after the allegations began. Under Colorado law, educators are mandatory reporters, meaning if they know or have any reason to believe a student is being abused or neglected, they must notify law enforcement or Child Protective Services. It also happens to be a Summit County district policy. There are resources and support available for survivors of sex assault and abuse. You can call the Colorado Crisis Services 24/7 hotline, the number on your screen, 844-493-8255. The group Blue Bench runs a hotline to support survivors of sexual violence. That number, 303-322-7273.
As soon as they locked down the building, we're all getting arrested.
Hey, use your grip floor!
A man living in Denver was sentenced to more than 40 days in jail for his role in the January 6th insurrection. Daniel Morrissey pled guilty in February to disorderly and disruptive conduct in a restricted building. He was sentenced to 45 days in jail, also 36 months of probation. According to court documents, Morrissey sent photos and videos of himself inside the Capitol to a coworker. Prosecutors initially asked the court to sentence Morrissey to 14 days in jail, but after seeing that video evidence submitted to the court, they asked for a longer sentence. The trial of a former Aurora officer meant to start today will now happen in November. A judge pushed the proceedings for Francine Martinez because the victim in the case is in jail in Denver. Martinez is charged with failure to intervene. We're going to show you some of the body cam video from that confrontation and just want to warn you, it is a bit of a brutal arrest. The case dates back to a trespassing call that Aurora police received in July of last year. Martinez and Aurora officer John Hobart responded. The altercation began with the two tried to arrest the suspect, Kyle Vinson. According to court documents, Vinson was the only suspect. He didn't run. He didn't resist arrest. Documents show Hobart pistol whipped, choked, and threatened to shoot Vinson. Hobart is charged with assault and Martinez with failure to intervene. Vinson was supposed to appear in court in Arapahoe County today as a witness in this case, but Denver police recently arrested him in a separate unrelated case, and he's currently sitting in jail. He's got a bond hearing on Friday. It has been a hot summer for all of us. I don't have to tell you that, but if you live in certain neighborhoods in Denver, you know you feel it even more because there's not a lot of trees. That creates what's called a heat island. 9 News reporter Luis De Leon takes a closer look at one of the neighborhood's push to plant more trees with the help to just create more shade for the future.
Growing up here, it ends up being like a concrete jungle, kind of in a way.
Carla Padilla would know.
5 generations.
She now helps run the rec center in the neighborhood where she grew up.
And we grew up all at this center, which is awesome.
The generations after hers recently came together in Globeville to lay out top issues in the neighborhood.
I think they see it in a different perspective than what adults see it. A lot of the things was even trees. They wanted more plants.
There's not a lot of that in the neighborhood right now. As a result, Globeville feels the effects of a heat island, which the EPA says are mainly urban areas with not a lot of canopy cover, like trees. That could sometimes mean it's 10 degrees warmer in some spots. The latest from Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment shows that the census tract, where much of Globeville falls in, has a heat vulnerability score of 87.4. That's in the highest level.
And we feel sometimes that's a disparity on maybe socioeconomic sometimes.
But there's been a push recently.
So we try to do a lot of mapping, old trees, dead trees.
Padilla says they work to get funding for planting more trees and have held tree planting events this summer.
And so we feel if we can do a grid process of blocks in the community, that we make sure methodically that our community is getting trees versus just random trees here and there.
Hoping to keep the heat out for the future.
So then we know each section kind of which way to cover with our next planting, because we'll do this for years.
So we talked about that heat vulnerability score earlier. Here's a map of that in Denver County. The darker shades of purple you see there, they represent higher levels of vulnerability running along what's known as an inverted L. And you can specifically see that. Those are the neighborhoods that run along I-25 and then across on I-70. Larry Swansea, Montbello, for example, they're in part of that area as well. Alex, Denver residents voted in 2020 to create the Climate Protection Fund, which looks to help plant more than 2,000 trees on private properties over the next 3 years.
And that's so needed when you think, 10 degrees higher in these areas with the heat we've had this summer. I mean, that's too hot for our kids to go out and play in.
Right. When the community group Globeville first surveyed a lot of those neighbors, around 80% they roughly estimate say that they were open to the idea of getting more trees planted.
All right. It's important work. Luis, thank you. You won't be seeing any new updates about Casa Bonita's renovations anytime soon. A judge granted that temporary restraining order, withholding the release of their plans. This comes after attorneys for the restaurant filed a civil complaint against Lakewood in Jefferson County to stop some of the plans from being released. The order states documents won't be released for at least 21 days. Attorneys for the restaurant and city will work to redact or remove documents requested through a new Colorado Open Records Act request. Last week, Lakewood released blueprints to 9 News after we filed a request through KUSA. Now, some of the plans we received are documents the restaurant wants to protect, specifically things like security camera locations. 9 News agreed to remove one of the documents from our original article after the restaurant's lawyers expressed some concern about employee safety. COVID's impact in the classroom is starting to show, and it's not great. Colorado students have a lot to make up for in the classroom now. The State Department of Education just unveiled the first state assessment results from this spring. It is the first time the normal tests were given out since 2019. Scores in 2022 were worse than those of students in 2019. Seventh graders specifically saw some of the biggest drops in the percentage of students meeting or exceeding expectations in English and math. Keep in mind, those kids were fifth graders when the pandemic started and just starting to get into those more complex levels of math and reading.
We need to be checking for those missing pieces and be filling them in as students engage meaningfully in their grade level curriculum.
There are also big gaps for Black and Hispanic and low-income students compared to white students. Now, the gaps did get a little bit smaller, but only because white students did worse. No students of any race improved from 2019. The chance to improve on those scores is here as school has started for a lot of kiddos, and some are still gearing up for the first day. They got a little bit of help today to get ready. Today, the Birdseed Collective and Globeville First handed out backpacks to students in the Globeville neighborhood. According to the National Retail Federation, families with grade school kids will spend an average of $864 on supplies this year. If it sounds like a lot, it is. It's $168 more than 2019. Tonight's event was sign-up based, but event organizers said they didn't turn anyone away.
It's huge. It's probably one of our biggest, most exciting events that we have during the year because you get to see all the community, you get to have community.
Over 8,000 school supplies were handed out in over 450 backpacks.
And I just thought that was odd for a state-issued check.
Yeah, banks are withholding Tabor checks because they believe the state won't pay. Upper Basin states are repurposing a plan used 8 years ago to save water in the Colorado River. Experts aren't sure it's going to work again.
All of us are going through something, and I think poetry is a great way to use your voice.
She's raising awareness of the power of poetry and spoken word for the community she calls home.